Through dance, theater, music, and visual arts, Hearts to Art is the auditorium's award-winning summer camp for kids who have experienced the death of a parent. Hearts to Art fosters emotional growth and generates lifelong friendships. The auditorium's week of giving is December 2nd through the 9th, and all donations support Hearts to Art, and a generous donor has agreed to match donations through December 9th. A gift today doubles your impact, giving grieving children across Chicagoland an exciting arts experience this summer. You can learn more and donate at auditoriumtheater.org. Today on CityCast Chicago. In the world of fine dining, there is no higher honor than a Michelin star, or to be more specific, 3 stars. So, which Chicago restaurants made it on the list this year? It's Wednesday, December 3rd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Since the Michelin Guide arrived in Chicago back in 2010, only 4 restaurants have ever received their highest honor. Currently, there are only 14 restaurants in the country with 3 stars, and as of just last month, only one of those is in Chicago. So, what does it take to be placed upon this exclusive and potentially life-changing list? To answer, I brought in the Chicago Tribune's award-winning food critic, Louisa Chu. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jacoby.
Last month, the Michelin Guide announced the restaurants in Chicago's dining scene to receive or maintain their stars, of which there are 20 overall. Let's start here, Louisa, with the good news. Who gained a star in 2025?
So the big news about new stars is the restaurant Feld, Relationship to Table in Ukrainian Village, got their first Michelin star. So that's a huge deal, not only because they're, pretty newish restaurant, like a little over a year old, but because they were so trashed online when they first opened. And I went and I was like, this place is really good. And I gave them a very positive review. So that was a big deal that they got their first star. And then Kasama, the world's first Filipino restaurant to get any stars, gained their second star in Chicago. So also a big deal. Lots of people know about them for their famous breakfast sandwich, but their stars are really geared more towards their evening tasting menu, which they actually didn't even want to do when they first opened. They just wanted to be like a little neighborhood restaurant. And they're like, the only way we're going to stay open is if we have this tasting menu. So there you go.
And most people talk about them for, like you said, their breakfast, their baked goods, for the lines you'll see early in the day. Let's start with Feld, because I remember you coming on some months ago and telling me a little bit about their story, of which I had heard a little. I have seen their owner and executive chef, Jake Potashnik, on TikTok. I have seen him on Apple TV, and a little bit of his story on, I think it's called Knife's Edge, which follows some of these restaurants that are hunting for a Michelin star. But to go from people calling it overblown restaurant on social to having your journey sort of broadcasted on TV to then actually winning that star within 2 years of opening. I mean, how rare is something like a journey like that?
It's getting to be increasingly rare because it takes a lot of, quite frankly, money to be able to do the kind of service that they're doing, because Feld is chef and owner Jake Potashnik, but also his fellow chefs who are also serving during dinner. And so it takes a lot of resources to be able to do that. And if you follow his TikTok, which is where most people first learned about him, you see that it is an exhausting day. That doesn't say that people who don't have stars don't do exhausting days, but it's just becoming increasingly rare because it takes a lot to be able to get to that point. Plus, he's really putting in the extra effort to, again, create those real relationships between him and his staff and their suppliers by going out on field trips. Not just locally, but like out of town. And so it's a big deal to be able to do what he's doing at that level, and doing it in kind of novel, unique way. And I think I said before, still one of my favorite dining experiences ever, anywhere. I mean, like, just not just great food and great service, but just like super engaging. And then, spoiler alert, they have a secret hot chocolate service out in the back. And when I went, it was like below zero wind chill, but they had a fire going and it was just a great time.
This is the perfect time of the year to be talking about hot chocolate in the back. I mean, when we look over at Kasama, for example, I understand how difficult it is to get any star. When we're talking about the difference between 1 and jumping up to 2, do you have any sense from the owners and the operators, like what they did different, or is it as simple as the people caught them on a better day? Like what does that look like trying to climb up the list?
I quite frankly think that it's Michelin correcting course, because I think that they should have advanced sooner in terms of stars. I don't know that they're doing anything differently. And, I reviewed them, like I said, again, early on in the early bad old days of the pandemic, when they were doing a lot of takeout, and then when they first launched their tasting menu. And I think that they finally kind of got like the breadth of what they do.
Opening in the summer of 2020, oh my, because obviously they were planning this for months and years at this point, but to open up at that point had to rock their world.
Completely. And I remember the first time that I went, when pastry chef and co-owner Jeannie Kwan, she was cleaning like the tables out in the back patio and it was empty. And, so when you think about like Michelin 2-star restaurants, for example, in Paris, I'm telling you, no one's doing like their intense morning pastry program and takeout sandwiches, plus like their breakfast and lunch cafe, and then also throwing down a creative Filipino American Chicago-inspired tasting menu at night.
I was going to say, is anyone else on the list really quite doing it like that? Like reaching because think about how many different Chicagoans they're able to reach that some of these other places, if unless you're going to drop that big, what feels like for most of us birthday, anniversary, type of money, then you may never get to experience these restaurants.
The other ones are expensive. Let's just say it.
Right. Expensive as hell.
And again, understandably, I mean, I'm saying that people are what they're worth. And like I said, it takes a lot of resources to be able to pull that sort of thing off. But I think that them getting their second star is really more about Michelin correcting course than it is necessarily Kasama doing anything different.
All right. So most of Chicago's Michelin restaurants maintain their status, whether they were 1 or 2. Did anybody lose a star this year, Louisa?
Well, so Alinea losing one of their 3 stars was the big news actually before the Michelin announcements happened. So that news broke actually by chef and owner Grant Achatz himself. He posted on social media that Alinea was losing one of their 3 stars. And then immediately after, Michelin sent out an announcement saying that actually they were one of 3 really big deal restaurants in Chicago, the Washington, D.C. area, and New York that were losing one of their 3 stars. So I have to say again, I am not surprised that they are at 2 stars, which is still, again, very good. Again, we just celebrated Kasama gaining that 2nd star.
Only 50 or so.
Yeah.
In North America.
But, when I went earlier this year to mark their 20th anniversary, I have to say I was really surprised by how really like wildly uneven it was. And we're talking about basics. Like I can still remember there were some dishes that were so salty, so sweet, and so much black truffle. And I know it's like tiny violins playing, right? Like, but there should not be such a repetition of flavors when we're talking about a Michelin 3-star restaurant or a Chicago Tribune 4-star restaurant. There were just like some basic like technical difficulties that were happening at Alinea. So I'm not so surprised that they were they were demoted. That's the official terminology. But I'm actually surprised that Michelin went ahead and did it, because there have been historically a lot of Michelin 3-star restaurants that
Resting on their laurels.
yeah. I mean, just haven't really, I think, maintained that level. And absolutely, if it's like a classic French restaurant in France and that's what they said that they want to do and that's what they're doing, okay, I understand. But Alinea, in addition to their technical difficulties, when I had an extremely intensive interview with Grant Achatz for my review, I mean, he again stressed to me that their whole deal is about change. And if that's what you're telling me, then please do not be giving me dishes that are 20 years old and are still on this tasting menu that you're saying is supposed to be really about change. And while those were some of the courses that were technically precise, I should not be getting 2 black truffle flavored dishes back to back on a menu at a restaurant that is really striving for constant evolution. I kept thinking about this during those dinners, which were about $500 each.
A pop.
Right, per person. And I kept thinking, it is time to let go of the balloon, their famous edible balloon.
I've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, and I appreciate if they're going to put out a special menu, an anniversary menu, but that has been around now for, I want to say, at least a decade. And not only that, but the onus is not only on Alinea and Grand, but I keep saying it's time for Alinea to let go of the balloon, and we need to let them. I keep seeing people who say oh, but I love that. It's I haven't had a chance. You know what? Then go for a special anniversary menu when they have it, which they did have at one point at Next. But do not tie Alinea down to classic signature dishes, because I know that they can do better. So they lost a star, which is correct, but I'm actually surprised that Michelin went ahead and did it, because historically that hasn't been the case.
I don't know about y'all, but I love a good hands-on class. I've recently done rug making, pasta, pottery, candles, and now I'm excited for Less Booze, All the Buzz, an interactive hands-on cocktail workshop where we'll get to shake things up with the experts. We'll learn about low and no alcohol ingredients that complement some of our favorite high alcohol spirits, how to lower the alcohol in our favorite cocktails, recipes, and that confidence to make them for our next house party. This workshop includes over 15 cocktail tastings, hors d'oeuvres, and a cocktail making session where we'll learn 10 recipes plus a take-home recipe booklet. Don't miss out. Less Booze, All the Buzz on December 11th and 12th, the perfect opportunity to up your hosting game. Rates for a private event are available. Visit their event page to learn more at dandelion-beved.com. That's dandelion-beved, BEVED.com. The holidays are nearly here, and if you're looking for something to do with the entire family in downtown Chicago that's part festive but also allows you to get your caroling on while being warm inside, join Uniting Voices for Winter Glow. Winter Glow is this vibrant, family-friendly performance at the iconic Symphony Center, filled with holiday classics, songs from around the world, and contemporary favorites, all performed by Chicago's talented young voices. And you know what? I think they love a good sing-along energy in the audience. It's the kind of joyful, heartwarming experience all your people will remember long after the season ends. And the best part? Tickets are sliding scale because everyone deserves access to the magic. Make Winter Glow your downtown destination this holiday season. Visit unitingvoiceschicago.org/winterglow to get your tickets today. How do you think, from everything you know, Michelin is making those decisions. Essentially, I'm asking, like, what are their criteria that really separates a 1 from a 2 from a 3?
That's the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
They're very vague about their criteria. They're very short in terms of their, like, quote unquote reviews. They're not reviews, they're descriptions in the guides. I don't know. We don't know. They're very, generalist when they talk about their criteria. They don't specify, for example, like why Alinea was demoted from 3 to 2 stars. And I think that that's the sort of discourse which could be interesting and helpful. But, again, that's not their job. Their job is to put out guides, very influential guides. I think that's part of their mystique, part of their brand.
Yeah, like you said, their vague criteria: quality of ingredients, mastery of flavor and technique, chef's personality, whatever the hell that means, harmony of flavor, and consistency. But again, like you say, what that looks like from restaurant to restaurant, from review to review, leaves a lot of mystery, which is a part of their allure. When you look at the list of 20 Chicago starred restaurants, which are your favorite?
Again, I have to say Feld and Kasama, for sure. I thought that Carino was very good.
They got their star last year.
Yeah. So of the Michelin starred restaurants in Chicago, I have to say for a lot of the other restaurants, I haven't been back within the last year or so. So I couldn't really say, and I know that Michelin is supposed to revisit all of these restaurants for their starred and Bib Gourmand, but there are a few, for example, the Bib Gourmand list that I wonder when is the last time that they went back, because that's a list that could use some refreshing too. And I think that a lot of the challenges with Michelin in Chicago especially is quite simply their geographic boundaries, their limits. And as we know, geography speaks to a lot of different things in terms of, demographics, and, we're talking about price. If you don't go anywhere outside of like the central area of Chicago, you're going to miss quite a few restaurants. It's important to speak knowledgeably about restaurants. And I haven't been to Ever, and I haven't been to Smith and Oriole for years, so I couldn't say.
And Ever has 2 stars, Smith
Yes.
is 3, and Oriole has 2 stars.
Right, exactly.
The ones I've been to recently was I went to Indian right before they received their 1 star. I've gone to El Ideas a few times. It's probably my favorite on the list just because I haven't been to others, but of the ones I've been to, it's probably my favorite. And I really enjoy my evening at Schwa. Obviously, the Michelin lists carry a lot of weight, but how long has this been the case? Because this is a tire company that, really was telling people where to get gas, how to change a tire, and now have some of the best chefs in the world like really competing and stressing themselves out day over day to try to get on this list. When did they get this clout?
For sure in modern history. And it's not only here, but for sure in France, where I worked. Michelin is still the guide worldwide that people aspire to, even though I know there's lots of different guides out there now. Everybody puts out a best list, every single year. And I would say that a lot of those lists, I would look at them with some skepticism as far as how they are assessed. I have from personal experience having been asked to participate in some lists where I'm like, I do not have a chance to dine out in like a broad area, and being asked to vote on restaurants and choose among restaurants, I think is, again, suspect. But Michelin is absolutely the global guide, the global arbiter, and I think that again, in France, where it began and is headquartered, it does a great job, not only in Paris, but like in the small towns. That's what I really love about the Michelin Guide, is like finding places in little towns, because the whole point was, yes, it's a tire company, but it was like the whole thing was like, is this worth a trip? Is this worth like the wear on your treads? I mean, and that's where it really is extraordinary. It can be such a guide full of wonderful discoveries. One of my favorite things is road tripping around France and going to like the tiny places that have like the restaurant downstairs and like the little rooms upstairs. I mean, and then like, so that's where they really excel, I think. And I know that again, the brand has translated globally, but again, when you don't go outside of anywhere, then the, like center of Chicago, essentially, then it, has a limited use as far as actually providing like comprehensive information in the city and the suburbs, which it doesn't cover. It doesn't cover the suburbs at all.
History coming out of France, like how has that impacted the makeup of the list? Because a lot of critics will call it not only Eurocentric, but, like gravely underrepresentative. Like it's still a list highly composed of white male chefs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I mean, when we're talking about sheer geographics and demographics, as we know, Chicago's south and west sides are predominantly Black. And so when you don't cover the south and west sides of Chicago, then you're going to be missing places that are worth the journey. And again, there's certain nuances of places, like we always go back to Lems, for example. I think that, had we covered Lems fully within our own coverage at the Chicago Tribune, I always wonder, like, what that could have meant in terms of our, like, broadening our culture. But it's like, if you don't cover that and you don't have, like, an understanding of the nuances of Chicago-style barbecue, for example, then how representative is that of our food and our culture and our demographics, when that's so important to Chicago culture? It's a huge omission. Mm-hmm. It's a huge omission.
When you're doing reviews of restaurants, because I think of a Michelin star kind of like an Oscar or a Grammy. And like when a movie comes out, people will call that Oscar bait. Do you go to restaurants? Is there such thing as like Michelin bait? Like you can feel that the people here are really invested in potentially being awarded down the line?
There are a few restaurants that have opened, especially in this past year, that definitely seem to fit that profile of like the tasting menus and really going more towards that Michelin-starred diner than necessarily a Chicago diner. And I say that with hesitation because while that seems like the case to me, I haven't been, so I'm not going to call them out by name. But there are for sure some restaurants that are out there that definitely seem to be going more towards that international Michelin star chaser than necessarily like a regular Chicago diner.
I mean, can you even win a star if you are not a tasting menu with some amount of like theatrics at the table or in the preparation of food? Because when I think Michelin star restaurant, I picture large plates, very little food, kind of artistic. Maybe I'm getting heralds at the end of this if I'm still a little bit hungry, right? Like not a lot of people in the restaurant. Maybe you're hearing directly from the chef or get to interact in the kitchen. Like, are these elements like necessary to be a starred restaurant?
In Chicago, it seems to be that way. In other parts of the world, no, not necessarily. There have been Michelin-starred restaurants in other places in the world that do not fit the Michelin-starred restaurant profile in Chicago, which is, I look at it and kind of looking over the list that we have at chicagotribune.com, our story about Michelin-starred restaurants and the reactions, they do all seem to fit that profile. The only sort of notable exception, I would say, is Galit. So there definitely is kind of a certain profile for Michelin-starred restaurants in Chicago for sure, and in the U.S., but that has there have been exceptions to that rule in other parts of the world.
Do you think people still care about these Michelin guys, that they're still looking to them as an authority for where they should go, where they should spend their time?
Absolutely. I think that Michelin still continues to be one of the important guides, not only here in Chicago, but worldwide, but it is just one of the guides. And if I can say, is that I wish there was not the glorification of the crazy intense hard work. And I speak from experience, having worked at restaurants where we literally had a 6-hour turnaround time from the time we left the kitchen until we had to be back. And that was 5 days a week, sometimes 6. That's not sustainable. And I don't want that sort of glorification for that. Like I see Jake doing his day in a life for Feld, and his followers will comment saying, like, how is that sustainable? It's like, how can that? And it's not sustainable in the long run. So I would like, when those considerations of chef's personality are taken into account, that includes like some, human consideration, that I would like for there to be, like, of course, wonderful levels of execution. And anyone who is going to try to achieve at a certain level is going to put that work on themselves harder than anyone else can. But I would like there not to be the glorification of like the suffering. And I talked to a Michelin-starred chef recently who was answering a question for someone else, and he kept stressing the suffering, and I was just like, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be more than that. For all of our sakes, it's got to be more than suffering. It's got to be, it's got to be something more in those stars than suffering.
Got it. So Chicago has 20 starred restaurants, but there are 33 restaurants with the Bib Gourmand distinction.
Bib Gourmands basically mean restaurants that are a good value. There's like a certain dollar amount, and that meet like certain quality levels in terms of food and service. And I think that some of their recommendations on that Bib Gourmand list are, very good. Other ones, I wonder when's the last time they visited. And I'm not going to call those restaurants out by name because I haven't visited them recently either. But there are for sure restaurants on there that I have been to in the past when they were on the Bib Gourmand list, and I had gone recently where I'm like, this should not be on this list.
There are a few that I've been to just this year that I did enjoy. Some that I've been to a bunch, like Virtue. I went to Taqueria Shingon for the first time this year. I had questions. Mott Street, absolutely loved. First time I ever been there was earlier this year. Loved it up and down. Giant is probably my favorite restaurant in Chicago.
Wow.
It's probably the one I've been to the most in the last few years. Bahia Zaragoza, I've been to in the last couple of years. I really want to go to Boonies. I went to Chichio Mio. And Daisy's is probably the second restaurant I've been to the most this year. And so I do have some favorites on this Bib Gourmand list. Which ones have you been to recently that you think maybe should be reconsidered for up or down?
I can't say. I won't say because
I thought I was going to pull it out of you.
No,
I thought I was going to get it.
I know. Only because, again, I haven't been in a few years.
Okay.
But there are for sure a few which I'm kind of like, I don't know when's the last time you've been, Michelin inspector.
Which ones do you think definitely should be on this list or be considered moving up to a higher list?
The ones that I definitely think should be on the Michelin Chicago Bib Gourmand list, for sure Lula, of course. Mott Street, I agree. Chef Special, again, from the team behind Giant. And this is not saying the other ones don't belong, but these are ones that I've been to recently. Yeah, Daisy's for sure. Yeah, I think that those are great restaurants to be on a Bib Gourmand list. There are a couple of restaurants, a few restaurants that are not on any Michelin list, which I'm like, what's up? I mean, which I think are big omissions. One of them is North Pond with Chef Cesar Murillo. He's just doing beautiful work. Like, that setting just could not be any more Chicago. I mean, in Lincoln Park with the gorgeous view and, again, a nice range, like accessibility in terms of prices, where you could just go for, like, actually you can secretly kind of go for a drink and brunch. Tasting menu, gorgeous. And also, I wonder why they are snubbing Parachute Hi-Fi. Parachute Hi-Fi.
One of my favorite experiences this year as well. That's the Vinyl Bar in Avondale, right?
Yeah. As Kobe, as an audiophile yourself, I'm sure you're picking up nuances from being at Parachute Hi-Fi that I miss.
I sat right up on the DJ too.
Oh my God. And I was going to say, it's like I am not an audiophile. I appreciate the setting, but like my brain felt like it was being massaged by sound waves. Like I seriously was like, I am getting a brain head massage right now. And their food, it's so creative, well executed, the service, wonderful. And again, for people who might not know, they had a Michelin star, but they lost it because they were closed during the pandemic. But like, I don't understand why they're not recognized at all, because they're executing at a very high level. They've got that Bing bread back. They are doing other fun, creative dishes. And that's one where I think Michelin hopefully will catch up, when they'll kind of like understand, like, oh yeah, wait a minute, this is not only setting, service, and cuisine that deserves some recognition, but yeah, hopefully they'll catch up there. Another restaurant, which if they covered the suburbs, which seems like it would be a no-brainer for Michelin, the French-based guide, is Petite V. I mean, again, V restaurant had a Michelin star when they covered the suburbs, but that place is just like so charming, overlooks the train tracks.
Out in Western Springs.
Exactly. And they have a detail, which, and again, not only is it terrific in terms of food and drink, but like the service, the setting, one like little detail, which I love, is that like every night they light like long, tall taper candles, like, and let them burn down. And it's just like little details like that. It is, I think, one of those restaurants that but again, super Midwestern based in terms of their suppliers and ingredients. They do, my mouth is watering thinking about this seasonal vegetable pitivrier, which is like this puff pastry, which is like loaded with all of these seasonal vegetables, and like, it's so good. And like, to me, I was like, this is exactly that sort of like that crossroads, that intersection of Midwestern ingredients, French technique, and like, but such a like a fun like Midwestern town setting. And Sanders Barbecue. If they covered the South Side, they would understand that Sanders Barbecue is doing some serious barbecue. Not only the Texas-inspired, but like the Chicago-style rib tips and their smoked brisket burger. I mean, chef's kiss.
I mean, if you ask some people, 53rd Street cannot use another establishment, but the fact that Sanders is going to be in walking distance from Virtue, which is in walking distance from Daisy's, which, it's good to see that corner proliferate, and hopefully, sort of rising tides lifts all ships, and the eyes that Virtue have get, sort of brought onto Sanders, and that sort of New York Times aura they're going off of right now sort of gets brought back to Virtue. I mean, if you've been covering this for some time, what would you like to see? I think they're about to celebrate 100 years of this guy, right? 1926. to 2026, what would you like to see be sort of their biggest priority or their change going into this next era? What would you like to see most going into this next era?
I would like to see most from Michelin the same thing that I try to remind myself about, which is exactly what you're talking about, which is equity in the coverage, is really being much more aware of restaurants that are important to the culture of Chicago, and that really has to consider questions of equity. Again, the demographics. I mean, come on now. You know, if you are going into tiny towns in France, which I have gone to because of the Michelin Guide, certainly we can extend at least to the city boundaries of the city of Chicago. At least. I mean, suburbs, that can be a whole nother conversation. And understand and have a public admission of why that is important. I would like to see a little more coverage across the great city of Chicago from Michelin, because it does have a serious economic and cultural impact to not only visitors, but also to ourselves. I mean, like, for a long time, again, I will say, with all due respect, Kobe, is that Sanders, they got their aura themselves. The New York Times brought them nothing. The New York Times is simply,
I hear that.
Yeah, reflecting back all of the hard work that they've been doing in Beverly. And so I would like to see Michelin elevate that a bit more.
Louisa Chu is one of my absolute favorite people to talk to, and an award-winning critic with the Chicago Tribune. Thank you for making time for the podcast.
Thank you, Jacoby. Always a pleasure.
Before we get out of here, make sure you bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you can subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. And if you love the podcast and the newsletter, please sign up to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor. That's our membership program where you're going to get ad-free listening, access to neighbors-only events, and every week we'll send you some of our favorite things happening in and around the city. Speaking of some of my favorite things happening this week, some good news. You can catch me tomorrow night at the Den Theater for comedian Langston Kermit. You may have seen him in comedies like Southside, Insecure, Abbott Elementary. Tickets are still available at the link in the bio. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.